So today we have a guest with us, Dr. Edem Adade from Albany University. His journey started with his undergrad and master's at the biochemistry department of University of Ghana. And he's had over 7+ years research experience. Um, I know him personally through back at the biochemistry department, and he helped me, with my application process, my interview process, and I'm so grateful for him in my life. He's one of the people that really believed in me and supported me. Right? He's also very passionate about health for translational science as well. And actually, this week marks his fifth year wedding anniversary. Fifth year wedding anniversary.
Jarvik.
Thank you so much for sharing sharing your anniversary with us. We are very grateful. So today's session is going to be very organic. We're just going to have a chat with Dr. Edem so that he can pour out all his knowledge about, grad school applications, because we always have so many questions. And sometimes you're just looking for the right person, right, to be able to help you navigate this process, because these kind of things are actually very expensive. People pay to get consultations and to get assistance with their applications. So, without much ado, I'd like to introduce our guest of the day. You're warmly welcome, Dr. Edem.
Thank you. Can you hear me loud and clear? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Yes, thank you for having me. Actually, the today's meeting, I hope that we can be able to share some insights that would help the people online. I see 7 people online right now. And I think aside myself and you, all the others are people that are kind of interested in grad school or already in grad school. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so I think most of them are interested in applying. Yeah, most of
Okay.
them are interested, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, thank you for having me. Jessica and I go way back. And so it's such a delight to be able to talk to you guys. And I've heard Jessica's grad talk series. I take the time to look at some of the videos, and I think she's done a great job providing a lot of information to you guys about grad school application processes. So I didn't want to come back in this discussion today with another PowerPoint, right? Because those things are things that you can go back to the old videos if you haven't, and then you can watch. She makes very detailed outline on what the package should include and stuff like that. So I think today's conversation is supposed to really be an organic kind of interaction. And then feel free to ask like important questions that you want to get answered, some thoughts that you have. And then we'll both try and see how best we can address some of those questions and then hopefully be able to give you guys some directions to help your next steps, right? And that's the whole point of this discussion today.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll go ahead and ask you some few questions, and then you help us answer those. So
Yep.
first question is, can you tell us about when you started your kind of like your career? Just take us from your undergrad to your grad school, and when you knew that grad school was for you. Because we have this saying that we don't know if grad school is for everyone, because some people feel like, hey, this grad school thing is not for me. So
Right.
tell us about your career and when you knew that, what, this thing is actually for me and this is what I want to go for.
Yeah. So I think many of us would be in the same situation, right? So when I was finishing high school, many of you probably know or don't know. So I went to Motor School, and when we were all getting out of high school, we all wanted to go to medical school, right? So we all left high school with the aim of going to medical school or do anything closest to medical school. Okay. So in that situation, for me, I applied to Legon Medical School. That was my first choice. And then that's like I did apply to only one school. And that was the year we had the awaiting results to university entry program starting, I think a year before that or something. And so I applied to medical school. My second choice wasn't biochemistry, it was biomedical science, biomedical engineering. because at that time, Legon offered I think they still do. And just by the way the name sounded, it was the closest thing to medicine, right? But in hindsight, it's not anything close to medicine. It's really distant. But I didn't make it to medical school. And I made it to biochemistry, not even biomedical engineering. And so when I started biochemistry in Legon, I didn't still have a clear roadmap what I was going to do, right? I knew I was going to probably end up in the graduate entry to medical school program, where you go to medical school after your undergrad. Grad school wasn't a thought in my brain, and partly also because I didn't know much about grad school then. Um, and many of you, if you're a first generation in your family, you probably don't even know what grad school is, right? You know that you have to get a first degree and a second degree, and then maybe if you're lucky, you know something that's called PhD, then you'd. But many of us knew up to what was essentially on the master's level. And many of us even knew it as second degree, right? It was like a second degree. So that was like the resource information that I knew then. And I shared part of this in the last podcast I had. But that was the idea. The idea was to go to school and then end up in medical school. Few things changed that paradigm for me along the way. And one was that it was just expensive to go to graduate medical school in Ghana, you know. And right before I completed, I had a senior colleague who couldn't get into medical school because they said they couldn't guarantee he would pay his fees throughout the 4 years of the GEM program. And so even though he was a great candidate, he couldn't make medical school. So you have to now start thinking, okay, can my parents have that financial support to support me through the graduate medical school program? Um, Aside your academic abilities to excel. So that again redefine your pathway. And then I heard about masters and PhD, that you can go to PhD and masters abroad and then you have free education, right? So that was another really interesting idea. Would you want to pay to go to GEM program in Ghana, or you pay to travel? You would have a scholarship travel abroad to do a master's or PhD. And so those thoughts began to surface again in my head during those times. And so how I knew I wanted to go to grad school was I knew I didn't want to work right away after undergrad. And that was also partly because I didn't know what a biochemist would do, right? And I didn't also know what 2 years of training biochemistry will that make you a biochemist? Maybe, maybe not, right? So that's those were the conversations that had come into my brain at those early ages. And so luckily for me, when I was finishing my undergrad, I became a TA. And if you're a TA, it means that you have a potential pipeline to be able to advance your degree with less stress, right? And so by being a TA now, you begin to interact with students that are in the master's program. And then in that time was when the WAGB program started in Lagos. Jessica, you know this program. And so I think we were WAGB interns, and the goal was that we were going to be trained as interns as part of our national service, so that we will refuel the next batch of master students. Okay, so they'll pick 10 of us as undergrad who are partly TAs, and the goal is to prepare us to be able to go into graduate school. So that was a fortunate pipeline that I happened to be in. And so the graduate internship, we had a project, we had research going on, but we knew that we had a spot in the graduate class, right? So that was kind of useful. And so it was then I knew, like, I'm going to do a master's degree. And then continue my master, I moved to a different research field, obviously. But then it became more real to me that these things were actually, there was more to just having a second degree. And that's when I was going to go to grad school. And then I made a move to go to do my PhD. And so because I was lucky to have that pipeline, right? Graduate internship, and the goal was just to recruit directly into the program and then move from there. So that began to like unfold a lot of things naturally on the pathway. So that's just a summary. That's just how things unfolded for me to go to grad school. I'd say it's a bit of making decisions that or taking chances that came up. along the way, and being also a little bit, uh, yeah, looking at the real side of, do you want to pay for a program or you want to have a program for free, you know? And I thought it was nice to get a program for free, and that was why I end up this way. And so I think that's my response to some of you as well. But yeah, Jessica, that's in a
Okay.
nutshell the summary of my
Okay.
pathway.
Okay. So your grad school application process, how was it? Did it take you 1 year, 2 years? How was the process for you?
Good. So as I said, so grad school is both master's and PhD, right? But in this, they refer to grad school as PhD applications. Um, and this is something I'll throw out because Jessica, you did this. You could go straight from undergrad to grad school to PhD in the US. It wasn't like that in Ghana, right? So I had to go to the master's pipeline together. So my master's was supposed to be for 2 years. And so in my third semester of my master's program, I was supposed to graduate in July 2019. And so once I had completed the first of my master's, I had my transcript. I had my research halfway in August of 2018, which was a few months after the 1 year of my master's had ended. I started applying for the fall application for 2019. And the goal was to finish my master's in July and start my PhD in August, right? And so I started applying within that window of 3 months. I'd had more research experience. Obviously, I had more information and my CV became stronger. So I applied within that window, which was about 3 months. I did 8 applications, no, 7 applications in that cycle. Um, I had 3 or 4 interviews before that cycle, and it was difficult. And then I took the GRE then, and my GRE scores weren't the greatest. I'll be honest here. And so when I applied, most of my applications that didn't go through for that fall semester. So by December, you start hearing back from January, February. So you get all these rejection letters, and then you start inquiring, hey, what was an error in my application? What can I improve? And so I was likely to get some feedback. And many of them pointed to my GRE score being low. But I knew that there was still an opportunity to. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to re-strategize my application, right? So I went back to the same schools I previously applied to. And then now I reach out to professors in the school and I'm like, hey, I'm going to apply to your program. I already applied previously in the first cycle. My GRE scores were low. I'm not sure if the GRE scores will change within the window I have to be prepared for it. Would you still be willing to look at my application if I choose to submit an application without a new GRE score? And so that was very useful. That became and I got a lot of feedback that asked me to re-submit my application for the spring intake. And then that became very successful. So I couldn't go in the fall, but I was able to get spots in the spring semester because I'd be able to confront the GRE issue. So I'd say it took me technically 2 application cycles to get a spot, but it's all within like 3 to 6 months window because I also inquired from them. So it all depends on how ready you are at the time of the application cycle, right? If you feel ready before the cycle, you can prepare that thing in 3 months. If not, you can anticipate and prepare within a year or two.
The one question we kept getting in the Google Form I shared out was how do you know, like, how do you find potential schools? Because, you're a student, you're starting from scratch, you don't even know the schools by name, you're now going online to find schools. So how do you know that, okay, this is the school that I think I want to add to my list?
Good question, right? And this question really comes down to choice, right? But the reality is that many of us apply to schools that we don't even know where they are. We don't even know anything about the school. The first time we know about the school is when we get to the school finally, or when we get admitted to the school. So we shoot in the dark. I think the greatest way to start looking for schools is look for schools where students from your institution have already been, right? And so, like, if you want to apply for a school, I went to University at Albany. I think if you're on this call, you should consider that school because you know somebody who's already been to that school. And that tells you two things. It tells you one thing, that if somebody from your institution can go there, you can also go there, right? And two, it tells you that it tells you that you have a connect that could potentially, if the person in that school is really successful, then that can be an influence on the decision for you to be enrolled into that school. So those two things are important. So start by looking for schools that there are other Ghanaian students, most even importantly, people from your undergrad institutions, right, have been. And don't worry if they want to help you or not. But the fact that they've been there and successful in that program, that should be one of your choices. Now, two, you can rank your schools according to their kind of ranking in the US, right? So you can go to those private schools like Stanford, Cornell, go to mid-tier state schools, like schools that have maybe Albany State, New York State, Georgia State, schools like that also have really good acceptance rate. And then you can rank your schools based off of that acceptance rate success, and then you apply. You choose how many schools you want to apply. Another thing to think about is some schools cost more in application fee than other schools, and some schools waive it. So if applying to Cornell is cost you $120, and applying to maybe U Albany and U Buffalo will cost you $60 each. That is two applications in one course, right? So you sometimes you do the math based off of the numbers and the application fees. Which school can you get waived? Which school you have to pay? But always start from schools that you know somebody has been there from your institution. And if you use that criteria alone, you're gonna get like 10 or 15 schools to start shortlisting from. Does that help?
Yes, it does. It does help.
Yeah.
Now, the next question was about
Oh,
funding.
but Jessica, okay, sorry. So how do you find these schools? Go on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. People mostly post their schools on LinkedIn, right? Um, so if you go on LinkedIn, you see, okay, Emmanuel, okay, you see my school, and then that becomes like one point of contact for you, right? And I've had people reach out to me in the past, say, hey, I want to apply to your school. What do I need? What don't I need? Many times we get back to them and we say, hey, yeah, do this and that, this and that, this and that. This peer has money, this one doesn't have money. This is a good lab that will definitely look at application. This might not. So that's like really important way to streamline your choices. Find schools that people have already been.
Okay. So then about the funding, some people get schools that they say, okay, you've been admitted that you have to pay this amount of money.
Yes.
How do you secure full funding?
So it depends on the program, right? Is everybody here trying to apply for a STEM program? Jessica. Okay, I see someone say Joseph Anand says yes.
I know
Um,
a few of them are, yeah, within the
okay,
same.
let's assume that everybody's trying to apply for a STEM program. Then you have a chance, right? Um, most non-STEM programs, it's hard to say because most of those programs are either funded by these initiatives, and sometimes there's money, sometimes there's no money. Um, so if it's a STEM program, obviously people can support in the lab. Nothing to also look at further. Schools that have huge undergraduate population tend to have the tendency to offer full scholarships. Okay. So if you're applying for a school in a PhD program in a medical school, let's take example Albany. Albany has Albany State University, SUNY Albany, and we have Albany Medical College. Okay. They both run PhD programs. In the medical college, or even the biomedical sciences, there are no undergraduate programs in those colleges. So all their grad students are supported by research funds, okay, research grants. In the university, there's a huge undergraduate population. So there's huge need for TAs. So the department by default puts up 10 or 15 lines for TAs every year, right? That will have to be filled either by current students or incoming grad students. Okay, but in the medical school, all the support for grad students are supposed to come from research funding. So if the professors or the PIs have money, they're going to offer you full funding. If they don't have money, they're going to be slow to hire you. So be strategic about application. Um, and I'll encourage you to go for schools that there's another population because those monies are nobody, the state gives us money. It's not dependent on grants, right? So if there's a hiring into TA line, you're going to get that, obviously. In the medical, in the research grants, people have to make that on their budgets. And then peers can say, oh, I can accept it, but I'm waiting to see if I get a grant or not. Right. So that's, and the second one is also apply to umbrella programs, right? Programs that recruit 16 or 20 people within a year. And then they allow the students to go on rotation and find a lab. Those programs have budgets for first years, which is independent of whether peers have money or not, right? So they can say, okay, we're going to hire 20 grad students, we're going to hire 10, we're going to hire 15. And then we're going to share them. By the second year, we're going to give them individual labs. And then peers will start making the commitment to pay their grants. And that's why schools like Cornell and Stanford, stuff like that, they have those big umbrella programs, and you can still get there and still get money, even though they don't have a good, they may not have strong undergrad populations, right? Because they have a chance where they have a budget for hiring first year grad students, and then they're going to take all of them and then give it a chance to choose a lab afterwards. So like that, those homework are important. Do that homework, find those umbrella programs, and then go from there. You don't want to be a situation where you have funding, and some schools promise you that, or when you have the admission, they will give you the funding when you arrive in the US. That also works most of the times. Sometimes it's difficult to cross the visa interview situation with a situation like that, right? The embassy as to how you're going to fund your education. And sometimes they get convinced, sometimes they are not convinced that you get the money. So try and secure those upfront. And sometimes to write to PIs and say, hey, I'm coming to this program. I just interviewed. There's no money. Can I get on your grants? Right. You should reach out to people and say, hey, this is my plan. Can you have money for me? And that those become very useful too. But always start from a little bit place where you are more certain. So find programs that are mostly umbrella programs and then lock yourself in from there. Mostly for STEM people. If you are doing stuff in like general arts and business or computer science, it's hard to get public health. Sometimes it's hard to get funding. Not to say that it's impossible, but you also have to anticipate those situations and then plan accordingly. And then maybe you can use those private organizations to get some grants to support education. But you always want to get something that is decent so that you can get to the visa interview process soon. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you mentioned the umbrella programs. Can you explain what umbrella programs is for those who don't understand the terminology?
Okay, good question. So umbrella programs is, let's say, example, we have BMS, right? There's I wish I could put some example, but I'm using my iPad. I can't browse. But I'll send some resources in a bit. But those are programs that they admit all the students into one pool, and then they assign them into the biological sciences program or biomedical science program. Within that program, there is microbiology, molecular biology, fungal pathogenesis. There's a variety of programs within that umbrella program, right? So you're not applying directly to, let's say, a microbiology program, but applying to a biological science or biomedical science program. And then each of those individual research categories in those research groups would they would draw from that pool of students that they've admitted, right? It's mostly present in a lot of institutions where they have big institutions where they have departments that are interconnected, like the interdisciplinary departments where they have microbiology, molecular biology, cell biology into one in one building. Those sometimes do joint admissions, and then the students get shared over time. Infectious disease programs also. So it's like those big programs that put all their budgets together and then they admit students and then they share them into the various labs to do rotations and then end up choosing the lab. So you're not coming into a particular lab, you're not coming to a particular group, you're coming into a big biomedical science program. And then within that program, you find your own research interests. And then you go and join a microbiology group or you go and join an immunology group. Stuff like that is what I'm talking about when I mean umbrella programs. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Good.
So the fact that I'm taking an umbrella program doesn't necessarily mean that, I'm letting go of my dreams. Let's say I want to do forensics and the school doesn't have forensics, but let's say they have chemistry or biology. Is that still something I can still go into and then later on pursue my forensic dream?
So that, Jessica, this is a very important question, right? And I've had to address these questions a lot of times. Um, and I can use myself as an example, right? So my PhD was in biological sciences, the Department of Biology. Um, my research was in microbiome and microscopy, kind of computational biology. Um, and then my postdoc now is in nanotechnology, synthetic biology. Okay. Um, what is similar across all of them? Skills. So the program, the idea of I'm doing an immunology program, I'm doing a chemistry program, and my current postdoc is housed in the chemistry department. Um, those I feel like those limit the prospects for many students, right? I want to do microbiology, and that's what I want to apply for. But you can do microbiology research in a zoology program or in a plant science program, and you can still do real high quality microbiology research. Um, and so you have to be strategic about, and it also depends on your application materials and your grades and everything. Some schools have great programs and have shared faculty. I'll give an example again. There's biochemistry, there's cell biology being offered in Albany Medical College. There's cell biology being offered in University at Albany. Medical college acceptance rate is 2%. U Albany acceptance rate is 30%. Same program, same house in different departments or house in different institutions have different acceptance criteria. Same research quality, right? So don't box yourself in saying that I want to do immunology and it must be immunology in this. An example. So I applied for, I think I applied for microbiology in Cornell, but I applied for Cornell Medical College in Wales in New York City, and I found out there's another biochemistry program in Ithaca, which was the main campus, which had really much more lenient admission requirements, right, and less more competitive, but same quality of your same shared faculty. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're interested in doing forensic, right, and you're applying for a program in biology, sometimes there might be faculties in biology that do forensic science research, right? And your research, even though you're in a biology program, would all be forensic science. And at the end of the day, when you graduate, I'll tell you this, when I got my degree as a PhD degree, there was no program on it. It was just Doctor of Philosophy. That's all. So there was no Doctor of Philosophy in biology or in chemistry or in physics or in immunology, just nothing like that. And when you get in the job market, you sell yourself based off of your skill set, right? How am I able to get a job in chemistry if I'm a pure biologist? It's how you sell yourself on the job market and how you make your skill set appeal to the person's going to hire you. So don't box yourself trying to pursue program because of the name, but really look at the departments and look at what are the chances of being accepted. And this helps also because some departments want fresh ideas. Okay. So if you have a biochemistry major and you're applying for, let's say, a program let's say, I'm going to give a very example, a program in chemistry, right? And chemists also do a lot of biochemical assays, enzyme assay, protein purification, blah, blah, blah. Now you're applying as a biochem and applying to a chemistry program. You might be attractive, you might be unique, right? Like, oh, this student might have interesting skills that might be interesting to us. Um, so sometimes those go in favor, sometimes it doesn't go in favor because it's a disconnect, but many times it works out. People like to have people that have fresh ideas. So if your skill set aligns somewhere somehow to a particular skill, don't focus really on the program name or program title. That becomes a blockade. Someone say, I'm trying to prepare a program in biology and I can't find any microbiology program. But there are people that have labs in biology that are running microbiology research, right? So think broadly, think about the research, not necessarily about the program name or program title. And you can always find the spots by doing that in any department.
That's so good. So, what if I don't necessarily have like a first class, but I still want to apply to these Ivy League schools like Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Yale, Princeton? How do I go around it?
Right. So Jessica, this is a very difficult question. Um, I always encourage people, if you're in undergrad, you're trying to go to grad school at some point in your life, or even if you don't have plans to go to grad school in some point in your life, I think everybody here wants to go to grad school. So everybody here cares about their next step. Even if you don't want to go, try and get good grades. Try. Let that be a desire. Because apples for apples. I had a student recently in my lab who got admission to Stanford, and he's a great student. He told me that when he went for the interview, he felt intimidated because everybody in that interview were from Harvard, Broad Institute, MIT, Princeton, Yale. You are competing against all these guys. And he's from U Albany, which is not an Ivy League school, but it's a decent school. He has 2 undergrad publications. He was really successful in his undergrad. He was popular. He got a press release. He got some newsletters about him. So he was competitive, right? But he still didn't feel confident enough in himself. And it's like, hey, man, I don't know if I'm going to get this because when I went for interviews, this guy's from Harvard, Yale, those guys also want to go to Stanford. You know what I'm trying to say? Um, so if you have a first class, it's even always better. If you don't, you have to compensate for it some way, somehow. You also have other skills that are really marketable. Publications, um, conferences, have a press release about you, right? Those, you have to find a way to demonstrate that you're a Harvard material. Um, because the competition is real in those schools, it's real. People get in, but they have to be exceptional. The other pathway is that if you have a first class, right, and you want to still go to Stanford or Yale, and you have like a second class lower and stuff like that, what can you do differently? Do a master's, right? Do a master's, and then now you better your grades in master's. You move from a 2.5 or a 3.1 to a 3.9, right? And now you have extra leverage. You have master's degree, you have that and that, you have that and that, and then you come out competitive. So I've had a friend, one of my friends who is now in Penn State. He got a second class lower, and then he did his master's, and then his grades just shot up significantly, and then he was able to get into Penn State, huge institution, right? So sometimes you don't have to fight for a spot if you have a first class as an undergrad. You may not have to just necessarily fight for Stanford at that level. You can just have to say get a master's, 2 years, and then now become more competitive and then go. Um, People can be successful, but many people that succeed at those competitions really have something to prove and something to show. Um, Notwithstanding, again, you can still get out of school with your second class, upper or lower. And then you do a postdoc in Stanford, right? Do a postdoc in Princeton, do a postdoc in Yale. And it's also be on your resume that you went to Harvard, you went to Princeton, you're an alumni from those institutions. So it doesn't really have to be you squeeze it in there because you're waiting for a miracle. No, you have to work out there some way, somehow. Those schools are competitive, and that's how come they get their names. They don't necessarily do good science or good research, but they just have a brand. And that brand helps their screening processes and makes it tighter. But there are several other good schools that do really good quality research. Um, and then that's it. Um, I don't know if I answered the question, and this doesn't sound discouraging, but they're just different ways to get around it and end up in Stanford. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you did. So I want to open the floor. If there are any questions here currently, if I continue, if anyone has any questions, you can unmute or you can drop it in the chat.
Yep, that'll be great.